Hi folks, hey, Roland Martin here. Welcome to my YouTube channel. You know, I read all your comments, and one of the most prevalent comments is, how do I catch more fish? How do I catch more bass? So starting this week, I'm going to start a new little series, and that is with all the ABCs, the tips and the techniques and the how-tos on how to catch more and bigger bass. I'm going to be fishing out of little boats, big boats. I'm going to be fishing some bank. I'm going to be fishing rivers, ponds, lakes. I'm going to be fishing everywhere, hundreds of different places, hundreds of different tips and techniques. Hey, let's get started. The first thing I'm going to do is talk about plastic worm fishing, particularly that Senko. Hey, the 5 or 6 best tips and how to catch more and bigger fish on a plastic worm. You know, let's start off with the first tip, and that is having the right rod, reel, and line complement. Now, what I really like is they have a new rod series that's favorite, and what it is, it's a 7-foot medium heavy action. I like a long rod and I like a long handle. Sometimes I'll even put a little UGG button on the back of it. Anyway, this is the new Pro series I helped design and develop. With that is I have an 8-to-1 ratio reel. This is the new Solus reel. It's 8-to-1 ratio. Now, there's 2 ways to look at the line. You can either have monofilament or you can have braid with possibly a fluorocarbon leader, or third way is you could have just straight braid. Well, let's just start with just straight braid because I'm a power fisherman. I like to throw in these heavy weeds and lily pads and stuff like that. So I'm not going to be fishing open water with this rig. This rig is a braided line, a 50-pound line for heavy cover. Okay, now I'll cover the others as well. Okay, that's the line complement. Now let's talk about the hook itself. I'm going to start off with a 5-inch 297 green pumpkin Senko. That's the #1 lure in the whole world, by the way. And it's a 5-inch is my favorite size. And to couple up with that 5-inch worm, I'm going to use a 4/0 EWG hook. It's a superline hook. Now a superline hook means it's stronger. And this is heavy braid, and I'm going to throw into the heavy bushes. So I want a heavy hook. Okay, to hook it up, I'm going to come through the head about 3/4 of an inch. Come around, put it up on the shoulder of the worm, like that, and just bury the hook. Okay, boom. A perfectly rigged deal. Now, let's go to lighter tackle. Let's talk about some open water. Let's talk about something other than just heavy cover fishing. Now, if I'm going to be fishing open water, I could go to light fluorocarbon line. I could replace this 50-pound braid with, say, 10 to 15 pound, 10 to 17 pound fluorocarbon. That's a great choice. Now, if I want to go and fish this with the sensitivity of this braid, what I'll do is I'll tie a little leader. Now, that's the other deal. I just love tying leaders, and I'm probably more prone to taking a 50-pound line like this and tying a nice, say, 15-pound fluorocarbon leader about that long. I use a double uni knot here, and I use a Palomar knot on the worm. Okay? That covers that. Now let's talk about, while we're rigging up here, let's talk about the third tip, and that is, what about the weight? Now, when the wind blows, okay, I prefer to fish a worm in just this 5-inch series, and there's bigger worms, and I'll show you that in just a second. But I prefer to fish this 5-inch worm on a calm day like this with no weight at all. And so what it does, the water's a little dingy here, and that's why I'm using heavy braid, by the way. But what happens is, let's get this ready to cast. You can't see it sink, but I'll throw to these areas 1 second, 2 seconds, 3. It's sinking pretty fast. In fact, it sinks down about 10 foot in about 10 to 12 seconds on just this complement I have here with no weight. So you don't need a lot of weight, not on a calm day like today. In fact, I prefer no weight. I'm a line watcher, so I hold my rod up high, and that's another whole tip. But let's just talk about weight first before we get into the line and the cast and the setting the hook. Let's just talk about what about the wind? Well, the first thing that might happen is that there might be say a 5-mile-an-hour wind. When a 5-mile-an-hour wind blows, I might go to a little 1/16 of an ounce weight right here. And it'll make it nosedive a little bit, because see, when I throw this worm like this, the nice thing about the Senko, and it's really kind of cool, is when it hits the water with no weight on it, it floats and sinks horizontal like that, and it wiggles back and forth. When I put any weight on it, even this little 1/8 of an ounce weight or 1/16 of an ounce weight, it makes it nosedive. So it makes it a different looking sink. So I get more strikes on the initial cast and the initial sinking with no weight, because it's going slower and it's more tantalizing because it's horizontal and it's easier for the fish to get. When you put weight on it, it's right to the bottom so fast that they'll follow it to the bottom and eat it off the bottom, and that's another thing. Okay, say the wind's blowing 10 miles an hour. That's getting up there, 10 miles an hour. Well, from 5 to 10, I'll use like an 1/8 of an ounce weight. That's an 1/8 of an ounce, okay, right here, 1/8 of an ounce, that's pretty good. And that's considerably smaller than the 1/16 of an ounce that I started with. Now, say it blows 10 to 15 miles an hour. 10 to 15, okay, I'm gonna go to, say a 5/16, that's a little bit heavier. Or even if it blows, say 15 miles an hour, I might even go to a 1/4 ounce weight. That's getting big now. 1/4 ounce is getting pretty good size, 1/4 ounce. And the 1/4 ounce drops so fast, they don't hit it on the sink as much. They're on the bottom and dragging the bottom with it, that's fine, but you've lost the ability of that sinking, slow sinking, and so many bass bite that when it's sinking slow. So the more weight you use, the less effective you are. So I don't like to use a lot of weight. Okay, now the wind's starting to really blow. Now the wind's starting to get up, it's up to about 20 miles an hour. It's up to 20 miles an hour, and I might have to go to that 3/8 of an ounce weight. And that's a big old heavy weight, and you throw it in, it just clunks to the bottom, and it drags on the bottom, and you might catch a few fish. But finally, when the wind blows, say 25 miles an hour, white caps blowing 25 miles an hour, I go home. I mean, that's just not the kind of fishing that I like to do. Worm fishing is not set up for 25 mile an hour wind. There's other things to do. You can throw a spinnerbait, you can throw a big crankbait, but in my case, I don't like to worm fish in real heavy wind. So, okay. Now, let's talk about the different size worms for a second. I have some right here, and here's say a 6-inch Senko. Now, with the 6-inch Senko, let's look at that. That original hook that I had is a little small for a 6. This is a 4/0 hook that was on the 5-inch worm. But look, it's a little small for that worm. It's a little small. So I have another hook. It's a size bigger. This is a 5/0 Superline EWG hook, considerably larger. If you look at the two hooks, you can see real quick that there's a lot of difference between the 5 and 6/0. Or no, between the 4/0 and the 5/0. I'm sorry. There's a lot of difference between the 4/0 and the 5/0 hooks. Okay. So when I'm using this bigger worm, I'm going to use the bigger hook. Also, there's another worm here that I like a lot, and that's bigger yet. Now I have all sorts of bigger worms. This is a 6.5-inch cuttail, and it's different than the 6-inch Senko. And the 6-inch Senko is big and fat, casts a long ways, and it's for big fish as well. The 6.5-inch cuttail, even though it's a longer worm, is thinner in profile, but it still casts pretty good. Then they make a 7.5-inch cuttail. They even make other worms that are even bigger yet. Now, what about if you go down to, say, a 4-inch worm? Well, I had some 4-inch Senkos around here. 4-inch Senkos are quite diminutive. It's perfect for smallmouth bass, perfect for, say, pond fishing for small largemouth. With a 4-inch Senko, I'd go smaller hook yet. I'd go to a 2/0 hook. Now, I had some 2/0s right here, and this is the Super Lock hook by Bass Pro, and this is pretty good. I normally use a Gamakatsu hook, and that's what I'm working with Spro Tackle now, and I've been using Gamakatsus for maybe 30 years. So Gamakatsu is my favorite. And by the way, Gamakatsu makes the hooks for Bass Pro Shop as well. Okay, now let's get into some casting techniques. Let's talk about the next tip would be, say, let's put the worm back on. Let's talk about how to make the right cast. Okay, make the right cast. Let's stand up for a second. Okay, the next tip. How do you hold the rod? Well, first of all, I'm a line watcher. I don't care if I'm fishing open, clear water with light tackle or if I'm fishing heavy tackle in the weeds. I'm watching that line. So to do that, I want a belly in the line. I want to hold the rod up high. Now here's the deal. You make your original cast to where you think the fish are. Okay, that little point there, that's the kind of thing that bass like. I'll throw the worm little point right to it, okay? Maybe a couple feet past it and let it sink down. It's sinking down, sinking down, sinking down. I'm watching the line sink. There, it went slack. You can see because I have a belly, I'm holding the rod high, and so I count it down. And so as the line sinks, if it's a calm day, as the line sinks, you can see it go out, you can see it go out, and you can see it stop. And you get a rough idea how deep it is. You don't know exactly how deep that was. Well, it sunk about 3 seconds, 4 seconds, so that's like 3 or 4 feet deep. Okay, so now that I have the rod high, I'm counting down now so that gives me an idea from this 3 or 4 seconds here to throw out here, maybe it's 5 or 6 seconds. I know it's a couple feet deeper. Okay, so I know that there's like a deeper place there. Or vice versa, it could be a shallow place out there. It could only sink for 2 seconds. So again, I'd have an idea by the time it takes to sink about how deep it is. And so I'm always counting the line sink. So that's a huge tip in worm fishing, is count the sink rate. Okay, so you know it's about 3 or 4 feet deep. Okay, now it's sitting there at the bottom. You notice my rod. The next really big tip in worm fishing is to hold a high rod. Don't hold a low rod. You need to hold a high rod for the simple reason that I can see the line better, I can see the belly of the line, and I can see the strike as a line watcher. And the second reason is the sensitivity of it all. I can feel a strike when I pull back just a little teeny bit. With my rod high, it's coming 90 degrees off the tip now. Look at that, look at the angle of the rod coming off the tip. I can feel the strike. However, if you do it wrong and you had your rod all the way low like this, and you had it all the way low like this, and something hit it, you wouldn't have any idea you wouldn't feel anything, because it's going straight off the rod. And the fish are gonna feel you first. With the low rod, they'll feel you first and drop the worm. With the high rod, you'll feel the fish first and you'll get the jump on them. Okay, say you get a strike. Now here's really a kind of a perplexing situation. You want the fish to get the worm, but in the hot weather, like here in Florida, it's hot a lot, and the water temperature's in the 70s, the fish are hungry. And they eat stuff fast. In other words, when they bite it, in about 3 or 4 seconds, they kind of starts to swallow it. Well, I don't like to gut hook fish. So what my rule of thumb is, I don't care where I am unless it's real cold winter time, and maybe I'll wait a little longer. But in the warmer weather, I don't ever wait more than 3 seconds. A big tip, don't want to gut hook these fish. So when you see the strike or feel the strike, 1 second, 2 seconds, and by the time you've gotten to 2 seconds, you got the rod down. I'm even standing up. Sometimes I'll be sitting up like this. I'll get the strike 1 second, 2 seconds. I'm in the strike position. On 3 seconds, I'm setting the hook. You notice I have, here's a big part of it. This is a big heavy duty rod, big heavy duty line. I'm in a bunch of grass. I got the rod actually anchored here. So when I come up, when I feel the strike, I drop the rod. I got the rod against my stomach right here. It's right there. And I have my hands on the reel, and I'm ready to set the hook. So what I'll do, and I'm just gonna go ahead and do that. I'm gonna throw it out there, pretend I'm gonna get a strike, and show you how I set the hook. Okay? I throw it out there. Count it down. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Okay, it's on the bottom. Let it sit there 5 or 6 seconds. Just inch it along, maybe twitch it a little bit, a couple ways. Twitch it a little, drag it a little bit. Watching that belly, feeling that line. All of a sudden, I see a strike or I feel a strike. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Well, he wasn't there, but I set the hook hard. In fact, I probably pulled the worm right off the hook. A lot of times you just, look at that. That's setting the hook, son. And that's what it takes. You gotta have a good hook set when you're dealing with bass. You know, plastic worm fishing there's a lot of different ways to rig the worm, and that's gonna be tips in itself. In other words, there's standard, what we call the Texas rig that we're doing now. Then there's the wacky rig, that's a whole different subject. Then there's the Carolina rig, that's another whole subject. And there's a drop shot worm and rig, that's a whole different subject. So, you know, we'll get into that too, and even floating worms. So there's other tips and techniques to cover all the other types of plastic worm fishing. But I showed you the basics right now on how you can set the hook, catch more big fish, and so I think it'll help you out. Thanks for watching, and listen, by the way, hey, hit that likes button. It's so cool for me, and I get the likes. It's just, numbers are the important part of this whole game. I enjoy doing the video. I could probably tell you, as a teacher in the sport, how to fish better than I can fish myself. I kind of mess up sometimes, but I can tell you the exact perfect way to fish. So listen, and I think I can help you out. Hey, thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. We'll see you again soon.